right, everybody. Well, welcome back to episode 9 of The Spark Show. Well, we've got some updates in the California primary election. Want to first welcome Cameron back as our co-host of The Spark Show. If you haven't tuned in last week, then last week we formally made our announcement that Cameron would now be joining us moving forward on The Spark Show as our newly designated co-host. So welcome back, Cam.
Great to be here.
So if you want, we've got Steve Hilton. The Associated Press finally called the governor's race and got Steve Hilton in the runoff for the November general election. We officially got Nithya Raman, who bypassed Spencer Pratt in the LA mayor's race and officially kicked him out of the runoff for LA mayor. What are your thoughts exactly with these results? And do we stand by what we said as far as this election being rigged, maybe some election fraud going on? And give me your take.
Well, I don't really think it's election fraud per se, where, votes are being changed and all that. I definitely think there's some chicanery going on with the process that the Democrats have legalized that inherently benefits themselves. Because they understand how their voters are and when their voters vote. So they have created this window to collect as many of their voters' ballots as they possibly can, because they're all going to show up late. And that was shown in the data for Nithya, I think her name is. So I think, can you call it fraud? By the definition, no. Is it cheating? No. Is it the spirit of representative, democracy, elections? No. It's who is it that should be represented? Is it the motivated voter that got out there, got their vote in, got it counted? Or is it the one that waited to the last minute and to put it in? You can make the argument that they were undecided, but I highly doubt a Nithya Raman voter was undecided on who they were going to vote for. So, you could argue this thing back and forth, but at the end of the day, the Democrats hold a supermajority in this state. They passed some very questionable election laws, and we saw that on full display.
Yeah, so in the spirit of free and fair elections, I was doing a little bit of research since the last episode, and a couple things that I came across was Assistant U.S. Attorney Bill Asley. He's going to be prosecuting and basically filing charges against individuals for election fraud in California in the coming months. We've already seen one woman in Los Angeles who's pleaded guilty to paying for homeless, votes on the street. As far as that was one of the questionable sort of election fraud schemes that we knew was going on, Nick Shirley and what was the other gentleman's name that you had mentioned did the undercover videos on that.
Yeah, James O'Keefe.
James O'Keefe, sorry. So those two had done some really good undercover sort of work to expose that fraud. And so now we also are seeing the Supreme Court's going to be taking on these cases of mail-in ballots, which have been extremely questionable and heavily favored the Democrat candidates in the races. And so we're expecting by the end of June to see what the Supreme Court has to say about mail-in ballots, because this is very much a COVID era sort of scheme that, Biden won California in about the flick of a finger with 81 million votes, 49 million of those votes going to him in the mail-in ballot. And so we saw on March 31st, Trump signed an executive order in which he reformed mail-in ballots. And, quickly as Democrats are, they wanted a federal judge to take a look at his executive order because they love to sue him over everything that he does. And the first federal judge to take a look at his executive order actually declined to rule on his mail-in ballot reform, which was great to see. I'm hoping to see that, we don't have too much post-election mail-in ballots allowed moving forward in these races. I think that would remove a lot of the skepticism and concerns that a lot of the citizens have in the Golden State.
Well, I'll meet Democrats in the middle here, and I'll offer, why is it that we can't have, let's say we have your same mail-in ballot scheme, but the mail-in ballots must arrive at least 7 days before so they can get to a voting processing center and they can be processed and ready for the vote totals on election night. So there's none of this, red mirage and all that sort of stuff. It's like all it does is it hurts their image, because it's like, even if everything is on the up and up, it, I mean, when you're counting 7 days after in super tight races, it immediately brings about skepticism, and that is the first thing that you do not want in a democracy is, accusations of fraud and stealing. I don't want to look at my Democrat opposition and constantly have to be questioning, what are they actually doing here? You were bringing up, the investigations of fraud, and you always see the claim it's, not even a percent. But I'm very skeptical of statistics, because you can take statistics and make draw a picture the way you want to draw it. I saw some stuff on the internet from our side of the argument that I went back into the data to try to verify myself, and I couldn't find it. And I'm sitting there scratching my head, getting super frustrated, going, no, it's there, it's there. And well, I couldn't find it. So I'm like, okay, who created this? So now I got to question everyone, right? Because everyone has an angle that they have to, support. So I just went and I looked at the hard numbers. And what I found is that on election night, with mail-ins, with, at the poll stations, Spencer Pratt's lead was only, let's say, 7,500 votes, I believe, above Nithya Raman. And that's not that big of a gap to overcome, especially in a deep blue city like Los Angeles. However, if you do have a fraud ring and you only need to collect 20,000 ballots or what have you, is it possible? I mean, I think so, especially in a small race like this when, it's not hundreds of thousands of ballots you have to collect, it's only thousands. So there's definitely some risk there. But at the end of the day, when everything shook out, what the polls said is sort of what transpired, between the vote share of what, they were saying Spencer Pratt was going to get and what he actually got. It was pretty dang close. So, I mean, the good news, the silver lining is Spencer Pratt basically got 25% of the vote in deep blue Los Angeles, which shows that there's absolutely a surge of dissatisfaction that, I mean, I don't know. At what point do Democrats, take a look at themselves in the mirror and, you can blame, it's funny, they're blaming all day long, the Trump administration and Trump for the ills of deep blue, Los Angeles and California. And it's like, yeah, sure, the federal government has, some sway, but at the end of the day, we live in a republic called the Republic of California, and we're, has a tremendous amount of power. And it's like state policy is going to be oppressive if it's overburdensome. And that's what we see. And that's the argument from Republicans. So at what point do they look in the mirror, stop blaming others for their mistakes, and start working on solutions?
100% agree. Taking a look in the mirror is something that they definitely need to do. And, to your point of, surge of sort of conservative thought or, wanting change in Los Angeles specifically. I think we had a disgruntled commenter on one of our videos who had mentioned that 3 out of 4 voters in the Los Angeles area are registered Democrats, which 100% is a true statistic. However, it just goes to show that people are getting tired of walking in feces on their streets, walking through tent cities on their streets, not being able to walk their families through neighborhoods that should be relatively safe and secure for families. And I'd also like to point out that why California is such a pinnacle of change and also kind of like a spear point for politics in general. One thing that we saw, especially as I kind of shift this a little bit in the COVID era, was this, ideology that we really wanted to keep California progressive. And we wanted to be the leader in, lockdowns and show the rest of the country exactly how this is done. However, COVID made me question a lot of things. And what specifically made me question a lot of things during COVID was watching other states and how they responded. When I saw heavily conservative states operating in a different manner than California, who was immediately forcing vaccination, you know, New York, we saw the mayor of New York offering burger and french fries from your favorite restaurants in exchange for getting vaccinated. Those types of things really made me skeptical. I wasn't about to exchange my bodily autonomy for a hamburger and french fries. I thought that was the most awkward, strange approach to taking on a pandemic. And so when I saw Florida kind of using monoclonal antibodies, and these other remedies to essentially kind of, treat COVID instead of mass vaccination and pushing that on people in their, medical freedom, I said, well, if Florida's doing that way, why does California get to do it a different way? If this is actually a pandemic response that is actually going to squash this pandemic, how are all 50 governors in our United States not operating in the same manner? And so it comes back to our elections, because if Florida can count ballots on election day and get the tally in and have a decision by midnight or the following day, how can California, such a big, massive part of the United States, which carries such a heavy electoral count, and we have a tremendous amount of seats in the House of Representatives. There's a lot to be a lot of weight carried by California in our political arena when it comes to the U.S. representatives, even the Senate, and then also for the general election when we are voting for a new president. The electoral votes matter big time here, and that's why when elections happen, the Democrats, are with so much glee when on election night, right when those voting centers close, they already call the election. And I think there's a lot of people here that are getting fed up with seeing that same old, uh, you know, process work to the advantage of Democrats. That when it just completely is watered down and consistently goes to Democrats, then there's a issue with the groupthink going on here in California.
Well, I mean, you touched on a lot of things and really got my mind going there. So let me see if I can gather my thoughts. One of the biggest things, right, when you're looking at voting trends of, demographics and things like that, and you say, okay, well, who's the largest demographic, voting bloc in California? And I mean, I might be risking overgeneralization here, but I would say there's a lot more have-nots than haves. And we live in this cult of personality in politics, and both sides are guilty of this, where they create these straw mans and they build them up into these big, into these great satans, and then they just attack the straw man. The commenter in our comments was attacking, the cult of personality against Donald Trump as the con man, and everything that the left says about him, this huge straw man, which it's like,
Pedophile,
yeah,
rapist.
it's like, guys, like this is out of control. But what does the right do to the left? And so it's like at some point the discourse has to come to a level playing field. However, those who are in power do not want that, because that is how they secure their power. Donald Trump greatly benefits from that cult, that straw man that the left is creating, and vice versa.
Really
So it's
quick, I would just like to point out that one of our most viral videos so far has been the video of you commenting on the epithets of the left and how overused and diluted those have become, because there's no factual standing in those comments or remarks. If anything, they use those epithets so that way they can call us those things to treat us like those things, not because we are those things.
yeah, absolutely. There's great risk in that, and so it's incumbent on ourselves to calm down. And it's like, if you're getting that triggered over someone else's opinion, it's not that person's opinion, it's something inside of yourself. So it's like you have to control that. I get it. Like everyone gets sucked into this and it becomes this high stakes poker game. But in reality, it's like, first of all, you can't put your trust in men. I don't put my trust in Donald Trump. I hope he will do a good job. I pray that he will do a good job. And that's the same for a Gavin Newsom as well. It's like at the end of the day, we just want what we think is best for everyone. So and how do we go about that? Well, you do that through service of others. So you have to judge, how is this quote unquote leader servicing the public? Are they serving their own party interests, or are they serving the interest of the people? How often do they buck their party and go against their party for what they think is the greater good? And in this state of politics, we don't see that. Everyone, balkanizes into their groups, and then it's just verbal warfare, and then eventually, if it just gets worse and worse, it's going to become civil warfare.
Well, it's an interesting thing to, the left would like to think that everybody who's a supporter of Donald Trump has no ability to be a skeptic of Donald Trump, which I think that if you're a very based supporter of Donald Trump, then you are his biggest critic. You're a big skeptic. For me, recently we were compared to being the Dan Bongino and a Steve Bannon's of, the podcasting world, getting on here and being able to talk and be paid to hit these talking points when, if people who just were quickly to see an organically marketed video out on social media of me and you talking politics, if they watched a full length episode, they would know very quickly that we are critics, we are skeptics of everything conservative, GOP related, Trump especially. They would know that I'm a skeptic of the Iran war. They would know that I'm a skeptic of, the Epstein files. They would know that I have dwindling support in certain areas. However, I'm not going to abandon our cause because I'm a skeptic. I may not agree with Donald Trump on everything he does, but I still am his supporter. I voted for him 2 times, 3 times, and so I think people need to come to this realization that the name calling has become so diluted because we do remain skeptical. We don't just blindly follow this man, Donald Trump. There is no cult activism over here. This is
Hmm.
not blindly following this cult leader. This is questioning everything and agreeing when we agree and agreeing to disagree when we don't agree.
Yeah. It's like the saying, don't put your trust in men, put your trust in God, because men will always fail you. Men are fallible. They harden their hearts. They do what's in their own interest. And so, when I see the criticisms that, the Democrats have Trump, I I have to go and I have to validate, okay, is this criticism real, or is this just hyperbole? And well, more often than not, the Democrats have fallen victim to hyperbolic, criticism. We've seen it with the Russia stuff. We've seen it even with this Epstein stuff. It's like, guys, at some point, it's like, well, you just see a vector for attack because it's about power. This is a power game, power politics, hardball politics. It's like, what have you, I mean, it's destroyed the spirit of this nation, where, what is it? U pluribus unum, out of one or out of many one. And it's like, well, that's certainly not what that is. And it's like, it's upon all of us to disarm, and to find that spirit of, camaraderie to come together to find a solution here. And that's why everyone's voice needs to be heard. And then, circling back into the elections, when you're having election month, you're really not, you're creating this perception of disenfranchisement. And so you have these Republicans around the country, closely watching, a deep blue, mayoral race, and they're feeling disenfranchised because it's like, hey, my preferred candidate was winning on election night, and we've been arguing, 6 ways to Sunday that, Republicans win on election, and then here you go, you create these rules where you extend, elections, and no, lo and behold, Democrat wins again.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think just as conservatives and the GOP in general, we have to get Democrats out of this, groupthink of there's no way that I'm going to vote Republican ever. I'm just going blue down the line. And same for Republicans. We need to start voting for our best interests, not for party politics.
No, yeah, exactly. You don't. It's like that's. I just don't. I don't understand. It's like, okay, well, first of all, you should not be voting if you don't even know who you're voting for and what their positions are. If it's a vote blue, no matter who, it's like that's crazy. And same thing for vote red, whatever the, whatever you can rhyme with that one. But, I think there was a primary or something like that in New Hampshire where you had like this guy that was a trans um, anarchist or a Satanist, or, maybe not trans or whatever, but just, I think they were making a point, a political point, is that they just put an R next to their name and they got elected, you know? and the things that they stood for were completely against the values of those voters. But what did they do? So it's like, I don't know. At the end of the day, I think the best thing for America, hot take, is restricting voting to those who actually have done the research. I mean, how do you do that? But it's crazy because you just have these big party machines that it's like it's all about collecting as many ballots as possible to solidify their institutional power. And it's institutionalized power that is the threat to the will of the people, left and right. It's like, guys, so it's like expand the vote. Hey, you know who else should vote in our elections? Chinese citizens, because everyone, America's a global superpower. So the Russians should have a vote, and, Indians should have a vote. Open the vote to everyone. More votes matter. It's like, it's like logically speaking, it's like, no, we need to restrict voting to, yeah. Anyways.
Well, you did mention to me in our discussions this week some of the things we learned about California elections and sort of the loose regulations that there are for voting in California. Some of those, horrific points in being able to register to vote.
Smiley face signatures are completely valid.
And then,
folks, that's insane.
People that actually sign their ballot and then it goes into the cure file because somehow their signature didn't match up to their driver's license or whatever ID. I'm not even sure how that works. That's just ridiculous. And then being able to, one more thing that I saw was that if you have a California driver's license, then you immediately get a registration form to vote. But I would also like to point that illegal immigrants in the state of California have no issue or not questioned on their immigration status when they go to the California DMV to get a California driver's license. And there are many that have a driver's license here.
Well,
and
yeah,
so
it's
then you're going to
free and available.
You're not going to question whether or not illegal immigrants are voting in our elections. Well,
they have every opportunity to.
Mayor Karen Bass was on social media doing her thing, going all out.
Yes, I remember that, making the argument, well, maybe they should have a say. They live here and they pay taxes. And you're like, how are they paying taxes with a stolen Social Security number?
And, she's also on record saying that she's being asked, oh, well, there are some people that maybe haven't completed the citizenship process or, that are here working legally, but maybe aren't citizens, but are contributing to our tax system. Maybe we're going to explore allowing those who are in the process of becoming citizens being able to vote in our elections. She goes, well, we already have people voting in local elections, which may be for a school board or for the water board in their local municipality. And she says, well, maybe we can explore them voting in our general elections or our primaries or our midterms. And I'm just thinking in my head, what madness? Are you out of your mind? This progressive ideology of allowing non-citizens to have a say or allow them to tilt our elections in any favor.
That's not progressive ideology. That's just power politics because they know the voting demographic of immigrants. Well, it's 75% clip to Democrats.
I call it progressivism because progressivism has implemented this toxic empathy into the Democratic voter base. And the toxic empathy...
That's just the vector.
Well, it tells the voters that you cannot discriminate voters based on their immigration status, which our
Of
Constitution
course we can.
absolutely tells us that we can discriminate on who votes in our elections and who doesn't. That is just a black and white. And the fact that we have anywhere in the middle, a gray area on this, is absolutely infuriating.
Well, I mean, it's like, come on, guys, you need to have some sort of assimilation into the culture, to like into Americanism, to, you know, get that, to earn that right to vote, right? Because if you're not born here, you're not born with those rights, with those inherent voting rights. So if you're coming from another country, from a totally different value system, and you're unassimilated, it's like it risks, diluting, our American identity. And what is that American identity? I asked the listener, or those who are skeptical of us, what is the American identity? And I would argue that it's the individual, right? It's the rights of the individual. It's not the collectivism. It's not this collectivist idea. And the problem, and that's the uniqueness of the American model. It's giving the power to the individual to be who you want to be. And you're not held down by the state and prevented by the state, you know? And it's the collectivist ideology where it's like, no, you have to do what's best you have to sacrifice yourself, sacrifice your family for the state. And it's like, that's what the whole world is. That's that's what it means to have freedom, to have liberty, right? Is to make your own choices. So if you're not assimilating people into this thought process, it's like they will revert to their collectivist voting habits.
Yeah, I think on the immigration point that we've completely walked away on our immigration policy from assimilation, which is tremendously scary for the United States and all of the people who are born here, because we want people that appreciate our culture, who respect our culture, our values, our laws, and anything other than that is pretty much, I think, dangerous to the American people because we do not want third world cultures, first and foremost, coming over here and creating that culture here in the United States. We haven't been a world superpower. We haven't been the greatest nation on earth by allowing others to come here and institute their religion, their culture, whatever it be from their other countries of origin. They don't come here to implement those values and that culture and that religion here. And while we may have freedoms here that allow them to practice what they did from their country of origin, that's still not how our immigration policy should work. And I'm trying to think here. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, it's one of those things where it's like you can respect, an individual's culture within the bounds of their home, but it's one of the things where it's like you cannot put your own values onto the system around you, right? We're welcoming you in here to be who you want to be, but at the same time, you can't force your values on to your neighbors.
I think one of the most despicable things I've heard Democrats talk about, especially Joe Biden back in his term, was mass amnesty for illegal immigrants here.
Yeah, it's
That's
lack of yeah, it's
terrifying.
it. It's a lack of assimilation. It's just more of this lack of assimilation. But why is that? Because they already know the demographics. They know that they are going to vote for them at least more than 75%. I'm being generous here because it's like if you really think about it, right? What is it that an immigrant is most concerned about, right? They're concerned about their security, so they're concerned about their immigration status, and they're concerned about benefits, right? And what is it that the Democrats offer? They offer them security in both arenas. So why is it they vote for them at that clip? But
Are you talking illegal immigrants, though?
no, all immigrants,
But I,
all
I, I have
all
a different
immigrants.
perspective on that, Cam. That was my next point because I think that mass amnesty is a talking point that Democrats love because that speaks directly to illegal immigrants. We're not talking about naturalized American citizens or people that are actually going through the legitimate process of becoming an American citizen, which I would like to point to. I know off the top of my head 3 naturalized American citizens. And I'm sorry to say this, it's not just because they hang around me or that I'm family friends or friends with them. They are all conservatives. They are not liberal. They are not Democrat. They may not all 100% support Donald Trump, but they are all, for the most part, very conservative Americans after they complete the American citizenship process. And I would like to point to a great woman who is actually my wife and I's nail technician, the lady who does our nails. She's a Vietnamese immigrant, came here. She's been here for over a decade. She just became a naturalized American citizen this last year. And she is a hardcore conservative coming from a communist country, Vietnam.
Well, there you go.
But to my point, she came here. Of course, when you're going through the immigration process, the legitimate immigration process, your top priority is your status as to where you stand. You never want to fall out of that process because that is a lengthy process to restart. And also, the second big concern, other than benefits, they don't even think about benefits right off the top of their head. They're thinking about income. What can I do as a legitimate American citizen to provide for me and my family? It's not, oh, I'm here illegally. What benefits are Democrats going to provide to me? Free EBT and free cash through the government subsidy programs, free health care. I can't wait to be there and just mooch off the taxpayers. And,
Well,
they may be worried about their immigration status as illegals, of course, because you entered illegally and there's the fear of deportation, rightfully so. That's our immigration laws. Anybody who thinks it's unfair, unethical, or illegal to just hit the deport button and send an illegal immigrant on their way has become diluted with progressive talking points.
well, that is, that honestly, this just comes down to the arguments that are made by the left, right? It's the oppressed versus the oppressor. So when they're allowing millions of people in and saying, basically, the reason why we're doing this is because we think you're oppressed. You're oppressed. You're oppressed by the evil empire, the evil Satan empire. And so we're going to rectify this because we think you are owed something by virtue of who you are, right? Because you are an oppressed. And so you have this victim mentality that is extremely prevalent on the left, where it's like they're always bucking back by this idea of, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But, as you said with your nail technician, well, she's not a victim. She refused to be a victim, which is why she allowed herself to go through the arduous process of becoming an American citizen, right? Because she refuses to be a victim. However, those who think they are victimized will never go through that process because they believe that they are owed something by virtue of their status. And they are constantly reinforced by that narrative, by the culture of the left. They're saying it all the time in the movies, in the academia, in the media, over and over and over again. You see this, like this case going on in Texas that I just heard about where this young African American guy stabbed another white dude and at a track meet because they were having some sort of personal conflict. And
I would just like to point out the young man who was stabbed and killed. His name's Austin Metcalf. And I'd also like to just get into a habit of not mentioning the actual name of the perpetrator of the crime because I don't believe that they deserve any, spotlight. They deserve to be in prison and suffer those consequences. And as it be, yesterday the news came out that he was convicted of first-degree murder.
yeah, so my larger point in that is the way the media was framing it, where the perpetrator was being framed as the victim. And, because he comes from that oppressed class because he's black. And it's like, and then you see, all the, the protesters that are arguing and they're very black identity orientated and they're getting very angry and they're taking it upon themselves as an indictment that, oh, here we go. The white man again is indicting us, because of our skin color, because of who we are. And it's like, it's like this is the danger of, these cults of personalities. It's like at some point you got to separate yourself from that and just look at the actions of the individual. And it's the actions of the individual that landed him there. We live in the same culture that tells us that we don't have the right to defend ourselves with a firearm, is saying that this boy had every right to defend himself by threat of violence by stabbing the other kid in the chest. And it's like, I mean, how you're talking out of both sides of your mouth here. And it's like, you know,
And
do you,
this is at a high school track meet. This is not, gang, streets of LA gangs going at each other or anything like that. I mean, you and I have both obviously been through high school. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
sure temperatures have risen,
flared. Yeah,
and
for sure.
we've almost been at fists with other people, and we're grown men, and things get out of control. But at
Yeah.
no point do we resort to violence with knives and weapons.
Yeah. I don't know. What was the verdict for him? You
He's
know,
guilty.
I know he's guilty, but what is his punishment?
So they haven't given the jury hasn't sentenced him yet, but I know he's facing like 22 years to life.
22 years to life.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, do I believe he should be in prison for life for, the act that he did without the possibility of parole? No, I don't think that at all. I think he deserves the right for redemption. He was young, he was dumb, full of anger. We don't know what the personal conflict, was between the two of them. Yes, absolutely deserves punishment, but he also deserves the chance to be, rehabilitated. That's the whole purpose of our criminal justice system is a chance of redemption. And that's the spirit of Christ. We are all sinners and we are all deserving of, Christ's redemption. So, you know, um, and that's why Christ asks us to pray for all those individuals involved and to show that no, this isn't right. You absolutely are going to face punishment, but it's not because of the color of your skin. It's because of the heinousness of your act. So, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't pray for the perpetrator. Absolutely.
Let me go ahead and shift away from the Austin Metcalf story and kind of float back to the immigration issue and how that's been tilting the scales of our election process. But Joe Biden era politics, I would just like to ask you, how many times during Joe Biden's term did we see caravans from South America and Central America marching to our southern border?
Yeah, I mean, it's mind-boggling. It's like, what were they trying to do? Well, we already know what they were trying to do. They were trying to dilute the vote. They were trying to get more representation for themselves. But that's not to say that Republicans weren't in on this because, what were they saying? Who's going to pick the crops? Who's going to clean the toilets? Who's going to do the dirty jobs that Americans, refuse to do? It's like Bernie Sanders was saying, 10 years ago, open borders is a Koch's brother policy. Why? Because it dilutes the power of the domestic workforce, and collective bargaining rights and all this sorts of stuff. So it's one of these things where it's like it's really easy to say that, oh, it's just because the left, but the right wants it as well.
So one of Joe Biden's policies was, well, I don't know about policy, but what one of his programs that he implemented during his term was this app that immigrants could download when they got across the border to apply for asylum here,
Mm-hmm.
political asylum,
Yeah.
which to me, I'm pissed off about that because when I think of asylum, I think of our Border Patrol agents being at our points of entry, having citizens who are coming from war torn, broken down, strenuous, extreme situations looking for a safe haven. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
looking for people to come take advantage of our systems, vote in our elections without citizenship, and be granted amnesty just because they made it across the border illegally. That is a
It's against the
disgusting
spirit.
policy. It's everything anti-American to me, and I'm sorry if you are on board of the there's no such thing as borders. That just is not right. If we don't have borders, then we don't have a nation.
You don't
If
have identity.
if you don't have a front door, then you don't have a safe and secure home.
Yeah.
So I don't get the logic there.
Well, it's this suicidal empathy, you know. It's just, oh, I'm a virtuous person, so I support the virtuous, act. And it's like, okay, well, who is that virtuous for? Because now you're creating this whole entire black market of human trafficking. And, and those that are, attacking Trump right now for the whole Epstein thing, how many hundreds of thousands of trafficked children did we lose? And how many hundreds of thousands did the Trump administration actually were they able to locate? I think the number is 300,000 were lost. Which, what does that mean? That means that the border patrol knew of these children and lost track of them. They disappeared. And then our FBI had to go through once Trump got into office, and they found, I think, 180,000 of them. So it's like maybe half of them were found, and a lot of them were in, not good conditions, where some are being sex trafficked, some are being trafficked for work. In one of these ICE protests down in Camarillo at one of these pot farms, they found unaccompanied minors working the pot farms. And it's like, guys, so it's on one hand, it looks virtuous, but on the other hand, it's how is this going to be exploited? What are the unintended consequences? And that's why you have to have that's the spirit of regulation. That's why California has so many regulations in the first place, right? Is because they're afraid of the unintended consequences that industry will have on climate change. So wait, on one hand, you're going to restrict, our economy because you're afraid of the unintended consequences of climate change, but then you're going to have an unrestricted border, not even considering the unintended consequences of human trafficking. So it's like, that's why we have to meet in the middle. It's not one or the other, it's both together.
I can't verify that what you and I have seen with our own eyes in starting our company early on and working with multifamily properties in these regions of California that are mainly or predominantly agricultural sector. Our assumptions when we started seeing some of the living conditions in what would be luxury multifamily communities, when we started seeing multiple families, children, and grown adults inhabiting 2, maybe 3 bedroom apartments, but expanding their living spaces into closets, into the garages, not using the laundry facilities, actually removing those to create living spaces, putting up curtains in these apartments to create more space, but packing multiple large
Yeah, like
families into these
14
spaces.
people. You're talking like 14 people in a 2 bedroom apartment.
And so when you and I talk about creating third world living conditions
That's third world living conditions.
in a first world country, and then it raises the question of, well,
Who's going to pick the crops?
who's going to do that? But who's even, how are they even coming into these spaces? How are these living spaces? And then it comes to the bigger thing where, well, during the day, when we're doing our exterior work early on, we see all
It's
of these
worker
people
exploitation.
flocking out to the fields to go work.
Worker exploitation.
And
It's
so
because they
then,
want the migrant workforce for cheap labor because they don't want to pay them, California wages. In California, it's like a wink, wink, nod, nod. Hey, we want $20 an hour for the McDonald's worker, but for the guy that's picking the crops, well, you can get slave wages.
right, slave wages for them, because it's probably or likely that the owners of the farms are actually picking up the tab on the rental spaces and putting multiple people, families, into these living spaces. And so that's how they're able to secure luxury living for multiple families. And then there's no regulation from these property management companies. And so then you end up with luxury living being completely occupied by third world immigrants. And so, you've got a perfectly amazing tax-paying American citizen whose next door neighbor is 3 to 5 families living in third world living conditions, pooping in buckets in their garage and doing all sorts of horrific things, hanging chickens and slaughtering chickens on their patios, which is totally not okay in these communities and living conditions in these communities.
Yeah.
It's the most bizarre, neglectful thing I've pretty much seen in my life. And that's one area of my work that's actually been pretty demoralizing to me, is actually seeing,
Because of how much you're exposed to it.
right, and just seeing how these living conditions can exist within these multi-million dollar communities.
Well, say those people are naturalized. Who are they going to vote for?
Well, if they're naturalized, and I'm not going to say they're not naturalized, if they're granted amnesty, is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
naturalization process.
no, I don't
Just
consider that naturalization.
through the amnesty
Well,
vector.
I call that fraudulent citizenship.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to vote Democrat. We know they're going to vote Democrat, and that's why the Democrats want a continuous flow. You know, I was actually having this argument with the chat bot, and basically what it was saying was, you know how we see these numbers all the time of the net outflows of migration out of California to states like Tennessee and Florida, Texas, Arizona, and all that. And I guess that's actually offset by, as the chatbot put it, international inflows is the terminology that it used. Not always illegal. You know, it's also legal at the same point, but guess how they vote? You know what I mean? So it's like this perpetual cycle that's never going to be able to fix itself, because what happens is, even if you have international inflows that vote Democrat, once they make it, and now they're seeing how much they're being taxed and all that, and how repressive the Democrat system is, now all of a sudden they've made a new Republican. But guess what they're doing? They're getting out of Dodge and going to a better environment. And then, but that doesn't matter, because there's someone else coming right in behind them. So at the end of the day, that's why Democrats don't care about cleaning the streets. They don't care about any of this stuff, because their voting bloc, the people that are keeping them in power, are just grateful to be here. You know, they're used to way worse conditions. Like, yeah, this isn't great, but this is way better than what they're used to. So it's like they can deal with, they can tolerate it. You and me, who have been accustomed to way better living conditions, we cannot tolerate it. So they don't care if they lose us, because their voter base doesn't really mind. You know, it's culturally enriching.
Well, I think it just goes to show how faded away the American dream has become. Because what is the American dream, or what should it be as being, being somebody who was born in the 90s? The American dream is the white picket fence around your single family home with a husband, wife, and kids. Car in the driveway, mom and dad both have one, a vacation a year. And they want to take that away from the American people. They don't want that to be the American dream anymore.
Well, no, that's racist. That's white supremacist.
Right. And so now they are trying to create this new vision, this new utopian
15-minute cities.
right. And it's
You will own
horrific.
nothing and be happy.
Yeah, and
Serfdom. This is more of this like talking out of both sides of your mouth. Their vision is 15-minute cities, climate change nonsense, where you own nothing and you'll be happy. But at the same time, the evil billionaire is stealing all of your money and repressing you, oppressing you. And that's the reason why you're not rich, because someone stole it from you. So it's like, wait a minute, like, what are these two visions that you're saying to me? And it's like, I don't know. It just comes down to cults of personality, right? There's always this Satan to blame for your problems. You are a perpetual victim. And it's like, you choose to be a victim. You can be a victor or you can be a victim. And what does it mean to be a victor? It doesn't necessarily mean how big your bank account is, how many possessions you have surrounding yourself in. It's your mentality. It's the fact that I'm here, I'm showing up, things will get better as long as I continue to move forward. And once you create that resilience and that strength, it's like, it doesn't really matter what the environment is. You just refuse to, woe is me, Eeyore.
the last point I'd like to make on the immigration and illegal immigration, and why Democrats advocate for it in granting amnesty, and why they push so hard for that, is because what the Democrats want to do to fortify the elections is actually to give them more seats in the House of Representatives. And that's why they've pushed for redistricting. It's because they want to build up the census to show a greater population so they could pick up more seats. Even if they can't get the illegal immigrants to vote in our elections, they want to pick up more seats because the census has grown.
Yep.
And
House
they want
of Representatives, what's in the name.
And that's how they're going to fortify the elections even further. And so that's why it's very important for us as conservatives to push back on this and to create our own machine here in California or anywhere that's liberal state, to fight back.
Oh, I got something that I discovered that I thought was just rich.
All right, well, give me your last thought because we're going to be wrapping up this episode here in the next couple minutes.
All right. Okay. So, past episode, we were talking about creating this ballot harvesting apparatus. Well, guess what the California GOP actually did? Because this came around in 2018 in the midterms, and Democrats benefited. Well, 2020 comes around, and the GOP responds in kind. And what do you think the Secretary of State of this California democracy did?
I don't even want to know.
Started sending out cease and assist letters to California GOP saying that they're threats to democracy by creating these ballot harvesting. Okay, well, what was it that the California GOP was doing? They were putting unofficial drop boxes in because they were exploiting the rules written by Democrats in gun shops, gun ranges, churches, all these areas that Republicans congregate. And guess what was happening? Republicans were actually winning in these deep blue areas, right? Because it's all about voter turnout. It's how many votes you can collect. So the minute that the California GOP started exploiting this, the Democrats put the kibosh on it. And they were saying, what you're doing is illegal. What we're doing is perfectly legal. We're allowed to. Rules for thee, not for me. And that's what I discovered. So, sorry, folks. I don't think Elon Musk is going to be rescuing us with a beautiful, a GOP ballot harvesting scheme, because the Democrats will just crush it with the power of the state.
Well, there you have it, folks. There's no Elon Musk rescue mission in effect for California, and so it's going to be up to us, the voters of California, and the conservative movement and the GOP, to push back on this however we can. Worst case scenario, I'm not sure what the worst case scenario is, but I hope it doesn't get any worse.
This is the worst case scenario, brother.
Yep.
It ain't getting better from here. I'm sorry. I was thinking about it, and it's just like, no. Our values will never be represented because of the machine that they have set up. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. We refuse to be victims.
Absolutely. And I hope that we can only keep pushing forward, and we learn from every election and figure out how to gamify this or push back and create new laws that will eventually serve the entire state rather than one side of the aisle. And we'll have to move from there.
The silver lining is we will have plenty of content to bring you.
Absolutely. And until the next episode on The Spark Show, this was episode 9 with your hosts Spencer Parks and Cameron Collier. And we will be seeing you this weekend for a second episode this week. And that will be episode 10. Appreciate everyone sticking around, having a listen, and hope that you guys will join us on the next one.
Peace and love, especially to my Democrat brothers and sisters.
Have a great week, everybody.